at a workshop in English today. It's the third CRIR workshop on the subject of learning under uncertainty, a very, very hot topic at the moment, as you may believe. So just before starting, I'm going to start with a few rules of how the workshop is going to go around, just because we are a good 27-30 people today. So just to for the workshop to go smoothly, okay? So first, if you guys want, we invite you to open your cameras so that we can see your beautiful faces and have a feedback for our presentator today. Second, we would like everyone to keep their microphones muted the whole presentation. And after that, the presentation today is going to be by Dr. Thomas, which I'll present to you shortly. It's going to be her presentation, followed by a question session. However, we strongly encourage you to write down any questions that pops into your mind in the chat. At the end of the presentation, Evelina and I will moderate this question session in the order that the questions appeared in the chat. So if we have time to finish all the questions from the chat, we will then moderate the burning questions you will have by raising your hands, and we'll name you, and then you can unmute your microphones. Finally, if you have any questions or problems regarding any subject during the presentation, please be advised that there's Evelina Pitouche, me, Jacqueline Lam, or Marilyn Zion, the members of the committee today that are assigned to helping you out with any questions or wonderings that you have. So private message us directly in the chat, okay? Any questions? I think I see everyone. Perfect. Excellent. So without more waiting around, we have the great opportunity today to listen to Dr. Aliki Thomas. She's an associate professor at the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy, part of McGill University. She is a research scientist at the Institute of Health Science Education, also part of McGill University. She is also the site director of research at the Jewish Rehabilitation Hospital, part of the CRIR. Dr. Thomas's research is on health professions education and knowledge translation. Her research is guided by the principles of the scholarship of practice, whereby research, education, and practice are interwoven and interconnected with the aim of improving the health, function, and participation of individuals in our society. Her research program is organized under three main themes. One, education of evidence-based practice in the health professions. Two, knowledge translation for evidence-based education and clinical practice. And three, education practice nexus. Dr. Thomas has a thriving research lab with several graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. Welcome, Dr. Thomas, and thank you for being here today with us.
Okay, so thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Evelina and Jacqueline. I'm hoping that everybody could hear me well, but if you don't, please do send a note in the chat. I'm really very happy to be here with you today. I wish I could see you all in person. I must say, I don't know about you, but I'm really all zoomed out. There's just so many things happening via Zoom, from professional to personal, and everything in between. We're constantly in Zoom, and I have had the pleasure of participating in seminars and speaking with graduate students at CRIR in the past, but it's been face-to-face, and it's always lovely to see you face-to-face. But I think that given the circumstances, this is still wonderful that we actually all got together this afternoon to speak. I am on sabbatical this year, so I didn't have to rush to put all my courses online in the winter like many of my colleagues. But I have a sneaking suspicion that there'll be a lot of online teaching in the fall when I get back. And so this is a bit of a practice for me. So let's move forward. How did this happen? How did we even think about doing such a seminar? Your peers, Jacqueline and Evelina, attend the Comité de l'orientation de la recherche at CRIR as our student representatives. And we've been meeting a bit more frequently than usual to really talk about what this pandemic, the effects of the pandemic on research that's being conducted at CRIR. And I know that graduate students are not spared. I think graduate students in many ways have different kinds of stakes, perhaps bigger stakes than researchers or professors. But I think that the purpose of today is really sort of not to, you know, put a judgment on who's suffering more, but to really to consider you as an important group who I believe could use some support and some conversation. So we talked about doing something for you at this at one of the meetings, and it seemed to really resonate. So I offered to lead this session, and I don't want this to be a lecture. So I had, to be honest, I have about 30 slides. It's not super technical in that, I mean, those of you that know me know that I study evidence-based practice, and so I am a huge proponent of understanding evidence and using evidence. But I think today there'll be a little bit of infusion of that, but I think what's most important is that we have a conversation about how this pandemic is affecting you as graduate students, your experiences as graduate students, but how do you continue to learn and evolve and hopefully progress as much as you can under these conditions that are uncertain and challenging. And I'm certainly not here to make everything sound like doom and gloom. That's, those of you that know me know I don't do that, but I think it's important to recognize some of the challenges and then find ways perhaps together to see how can we overcome some of those, or how can we leverage some of those for something good. And I am doing this in English, you know, and I'm happy to stop and translate, but our conversation will be bilingual, and I think that that's really very important. So again, thank you for having me. So basically, the goal of the seminar, as you saw it, is for you. It's tailored to you and your needs during the pandemic. How to make most of this and discuss learning opportunities, maybe coping strategies, but also ways forward to help you learn and thrive despite the challenges that we're all facing in the academic and research environment. And hopefully have a thoughtful conversation and maybe even be able to have a laugh or two. So the first thing that I want to really say to you is that this sucks. Really and truly, there is no other way. We have to basically admit that this situation really sucks. And I know it's not perhaps very professional or very evidence-based, but it is what it is. I think on many levels, it's a situation that, you know, I know you're all grown adults, but at the end of the day, I'm sure you've used this word and many others. It's just a really bad situation. And in many ways, when you sort of think about graduate school, graduate studies, at least in my view, having been a graduate student and having a number of my own, you know, this is a period of time where you are or have been or will be in, you know, personal relationships, romantic relationships. These are evolving or growing or starting. Many students at this point in their lives are considering buying a home, investing in a home, changing a home. Some of you have children or thinking of having children. You certainly have a bunch of domestic responsibilities. I know that many of you do live alone or with partners or with friends. And so this is not so much a time where parents and others are doing these sorts of more domestic tasks, and that's something you have to do. as part of your daily activities. But it's also a time where you're dreaming and thinking about, what are the next big steps in your life, and how graduate school is likely a means to this greater end of you obtaining a dream job. But it's also a time, so you're sort of involved in all these different life events, but it's also a time of excitement, and there's often some fear or trepidation, nerves or anxiety about how school is going to go, and will you get this dream job, and will you be able to navigate all these different responsibilities. There's always uncertainty when we're in school in terms of how well and how fast things will progress. And that sometimes brings, a stress, and sometimes it validates how incredibly smart and resourceful and talented you are. I mean, this is a time also where you say, wow, I'm doing great. I can write. I'm able to put together a wonderful presentation. I can articulate a thoughtful argument for my research. And this is, in my opinion, where a bit of the imposter syndrome begins, right? So the imposter syndrome is, well, somebody's going to wake up one day and realize that I'm just a fraud. I'm just don't belong in this community, right? And it starts in graduate school, particularly as you start to develop some expertise and start gaining some scholarships and having successes, and you say, whoa, somebody's going to wake up one day and realize that I didn't get, I don't have my high school diploma, so I have absolutely no reason for being here, right? So the imposter syndrome sometimes also starts during graduate school. So like that wasn't enough. In the middle of all of this, we are now hit by this pandemic, and everything just comes to a screeching halt. And that is, as you know, classes ended for a while, they restarted. They were paused and restarted. The labs have closed, and that happened very rapidly. And with labs closing came directives from the ministry to, of course, stop any research activity. So again, this just all sucks, right? This is just a really not too good situation, and it brings up a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And so, let's think about why this sucks. So it may be that some of you are alone or isolated. Some of you might be worried about what's going to happen during this time, but also outcomes of this pandemic on your learning and on your accomplishments. You might not feel that your future is unclear, whereas you had this well laid out path. Now all that's been thrown in the air, and you're wondering what's going to happen with timelines. Many of you have invested a lot and made sacrifices to be in graduate school, both personal and professional sacrifices, right? Leaving relationships and families behind, taking huge salary cuts for some of you, for example, that were working clinicians and came back to school full time. You are, by virtue of many of these elements, more in a vulnerable position, because all of this situation brings a lot of instability. Some of you now have minimum income, and you have minimum income because if it's not that you are working in the hospital, in the hospitality industry as a part-time job, that's been closed, but now the labs are closed, or RA jobs are closed, TA jobs, etc. And for some of you, you have family to take care of. So you might have lost money, social and professional support. You might have lost research time, and you might have lost social contacts. But that's my impression. But don't take me at my word. I actually asked you the question, and I got quite an overwhelming response. To the point where I wondered whether there was something that I could do with this from a research point of view, because a very, very quick thematic analysis of all these points. And Evelina, this is all, I don't think anybody can get identified. I triple checked, but essentially, if you don't take it from me, take it from your peers. many of whom are on this call. So I asked the question, what have you lost? And there's some really powerful accounts: socialization, research protocols, deadlines, data that have been lost, space to work. It really struck me. I hadn't even realized that you not having physical space to work has some important implications. Either you now have to cram in your apartment, or you simply don't have a physical space that's conducive to working. A personal routine, multiple sources of revenue, a feeling of continuity, a feeling of motivation, and that was not surprising, motivation that's brought on by some structure and activities moving on. Events that used to spice up your life, and in particular, one of the comments was all these conferences that were coming up. And we know at CRIR this year, right, there was the CRIR huge party celebration. Those of you in KT, there was KT Canada and McGill's KT conference and so many other conferences. You know, a loss of a schedule and a loss of a structure, personal contact, ability to focus, and bless your hearts, libido apparently was one of them that came up, which I found very, very interesting, because it's really at the personal and at a professional level. So, okay, so in the grand scheme of things, we have this global crisis, this global pandemic, right? So we have, as you look at this map, all the countries, everybody's affected. You look at the stats, and those are staggering. I stopped looking at the news for a few days, and it went from 2 million to 3.5 million cases in the world, right? So you might say to yourself, okay, well, in the grand scheme of things, you know, people are dying. This is taking over the world, you know, so, oh, well, you know, what does this all mean for us? And so at the same time, there's all these, what I would call cliches, right? Well, there's worse things in life, and well, we're all in the same boat. It could be worse for you, right? Because you haven't been infected, or you're not in the front lines, or it's going to get better, or at least you have XYZ, right? At least you have income, or at least you have family to support you, or at least you have a wonderful supportive supervisor, right? So yes, these comments have been coming up, and I'm not suggesting they have no value, but at a time of crisis like this, I would venture to think that some of you might believe that or think that these are to some degree cliches. So what's at stake? So yes, your experiences, your graduation dates, your professional positions, your personal plans. It could be that you were planning on a big holiday this summer, or you were hoping to buy a house, or you wanted to get married, or etc. There could be many different personal plans that have been put on hold. You know, your learning and what this means for your learning, your professional development, your scholarships, and many of those points are important for your CV. Something that, as many of you know, is extremely important in graduate school. We were talking with one of your peers at the beginning, talking about obtaining scholarships and how wonderful that is, and it is a moment of happiness, and it certainly helps you for your resume and for future positions and future studies or postdoctoral fellowships, etc. But again, don't take it from me. Take it from the responses that I got when I said, okay, you know, what are some of the stakes, and what's happening, and what are you worried about? And these were some of the themes that came out. I worry about completing my studies. I worry about incomplete goals. How long is this pandemic going to last? And will there be a second wave? You know, what does this mean for my career goals? I had a job planned, or I had somewhere I wanted to be professionally in 2 years. Some talked about self-judgment, which I thought was very interesting, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Graduation dates, absolutely. Mental health, a very serious one right now. Catching up was another important one that when I read the comments, some people are worried that by the time this all ends, how are we all going to catch up, right? How are we all going to just catch up for all this lost time? Evelina, I see things coming up. Do I need to stop? No?
No.
Okay. Just because I only see you and Jackie at the bottom, but just, make a sign if I need to stop.
Perfect. We will. Thank you, Aliki.
Changing study designs. This one actually took me a little bit by surprise, because some of the data collection and research that's being done may not be amenable to such a big stop. So if some of you are involved in pilot trials or longitudinal data collection, this is an important concern. Loved ones' well-being, there were comments about, infecting others, infecting, older adults, the long-term consequences of the pandemic, and being able to return home or come back to Canada when all this is done. And my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that some of you are currently not in Montreal, and that you are very worried that if this lasts very long, when will you actually be physically able to get back on a plane? But having said all that, and I've spent the last 10 minutes or so painting what probably sounds a bit of a bleak picture, but is all this a doom and gloom? Is it all quite negative, and are we all in this black, experiencing a black sky with many black clouds? Or is there something positive that can come out of this, and is there something that we can do based on some of the affordances that the pandemic is putting forward? And so I will address a little bit of that. I don't have all the answers. I'm happy to stimulate the discussion, but to some degree, how full or how empty is this glass? So here you see every bad situation has something positive. Even a stopped clock is correct twice a day. So what I'm trying to say here is that graduate school is this incredible time of intellectual stimulation and effort, right? And the reality is, I know for myself, having been a student, and maybe for some of you, what we would all love is for our graduate experience to be like the graph in the middle. But oftentimes our experience is a bit like the illustration at the bottom. And that, for many students, tends to be seen as something negative. But in my experience, there's a lot of positive that comes out with some of the bumpiness and some of the iterative nature of graduate work. And I say that because if there was ever something to put a huge bump into our lives right now, it is for sure the pandemic. So here are some evidence-based important concepts in the time of hardship that I want us to draw upon when we talk later on about some of the solutions and how we move forward. Resilience is important. Resilience, self-blame, acceptance, positive refocusing, rumination, blaming or not blaming others, trying to change our perspective or take a different perspective, and refocusing our planning, which to me also involves refocusing our learning. So what I did when we decided to hold this seminar is I actually wrote to two of my colleagues, Dr. Steve Shaw and Dr. Nathan Hall. Steve Shaw is a psychologist in the Faculty of Education at McGill, and Nathan Hall, whom some of you might know from Twitter, he is the developer of Shit Academics Say. So if you follow that, you'll see that, and forgive the use of the word, but it's a really wonderful web Twitter feed. So these two colleagues of mine, so Steve's a psychologist and he's done a lot of work in this area, and Nathan actually studies graduate learning and graduate stress and emotions and self-regulation. And so I said, wow, who best to give me a couple of pointers and make sure I'm okay with some of the evidence that I want to present. And this isn't from a paper. This was just what Steve told me when I asked him the question. I said, what first comes to mind? This is why I write personal communication. He says, such a big external shock to the system requires emotional and pragmatic support. So the first thing I want to give you as advice is that this isn't only going to be emotional or pragmatic, it's going to be both, right? To get through this pandemic and to succeed through this pandemic and to feel that we haven't lost anything in terms of our learning and development as graduate students, the interventions or the strategies will have to be at both levels. So I went back and I looked at some of the evidence, and this is actually a wonderful, it's a review of the factors that influence doctoral student completion, achievement, and well-being. And I thought that I would share that with you. It's not so much about it being in a pandemic, but I think that some of the findings from this review actually ring true to some of the experiences that I've heard you mention to me. And as you could see, Nathan is a co-author. So they found that 2 sets of factors affect the progress and completion of doctoral degrees: university factors and student factors. So this might not come as a surprise to you. Fit with supervisor, as well as institutional expectations and regulations. These factors are predictive of how successful you will be. If you get along with your supervisor, you have a great relationship, and that the institutional rules and regulations are clear to you for completing your studies. But what I want to focus on more for the next 2 minutes or so are the student factors. So there are demographic characteristics like disciplinary background, your aptitudes, your things that happen in your personal life and some of the structures. And you see examples here like financial support, living arrangement, and the number of people that you have as dependents. So within the student, sort of associated more with the student factors, we see external factors, so the relationships and structures that involve individuals, resources, and institutions that are outside of your control, but that directly or indirectly will impact your progress. So again, your supervision, your personal and social lives, the rules and regulations within your departments, and the abilities, the opportunities for socialization within those, and financial support opportunities. Some of this is outside your control, particularly now during a time of pandemic. That is a fact, and that's granted, and I do not take this lightly. But I do want to also focus on internal factors. So internal factors are what's going on in your own sort of head and heart, right? So concentrating on, and these concentrate on inner processes, and these are the psychological and the mental processes that are directly associated with your academic work. And you will see when we talk about what we all can do to get through this, how important these are. Your motivation, your writing skills, strategies that you use to self-regulate yourself and your learning, and your academic identity. That these are very important. Your identity as a graduate student is an important internal factor in helping you to develop some of the resilience that you need to be able to get through this difficult time. So what are some of the affordances of grad school, right? So what do you currently have at the moment at your disposal? First, in my opinion, you have flexibility. There isn't the sort of 9 to 5 or the necessarily all the classes that you need to get to. You have a lot of peers. You have lab structures, right? So with other graduate students, with research assistants, with your supervisors, you have the university services, and you have CRIR. And CRIR is very committed to helping you get through these difficult times. And I know that today's seminar is only a very small part, but this is some evidence that keeping in touch with you and giving you some support is a small something in trying to get us all through this. And of course, some resources, right? So some of your supervisors might have some resources. Some of your fellow graduate students have resources that perhaps they can share with you, either either because they actually are from Montreal or they have access to some additional means, even though we have the physical distancing. But these are some of the affordances of graduate school. So let's talk about graduate school in terms of your learning. So you have the formal activities, right? You have your courses, you have the lab structures where we most of us at least meet on a regular basis, your comprehensive exam, you have, like I said, your classes, and some of the conferences that are formal events where you are expected to learn something and to contribute something. But graduate school, a lot of the learning in graduate school happens informally. And I think that recognizing this is actually very advantageous in rethinking or restructuring our thought processes, as I was mentioning earlier, in that learning happens in hallways, it happens in elevators, it happens with a super conversation. It happens as most of us now are meeting with our graduate students weekly or bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, discussing different things and getting different ideas. They happen because you have a committee member who has expertise and you say, oh, I'd like to pick your brain. So learning in graduate school is far from only being formal. So many of the opportunities afforded to you are opportunities through graduate school, are opportunities for learning. And the question is, how do you capitalize on those? How do you begin by identifying every single opportunity that's offered to you or to your peers right now and leverage that to address one or more of the shortcomings associated with the pandemic? So I'm going to come back to the important concepts in times of hardship. I took the 8 concepts and I reorganized them into 2 which I feel are, easy to get you into a vicious cycle, okay? So ruminating or self-blame. So ruminating is nonstop thinking about and talking about and pondering on what's happened, okay? So rumination is far from being a constructive construct. It's important in times of hardships, it's there, but it's not one of the constructive ones. Neither is self-blame, okay? So these are considered more negative, but what I want you to think about are the 6 in yellow. What the 6 in yellow can do is they can actually help you break the vicious cycle, okay? So not blaming others, not blaming, countries that had huge rates of COVID and, we got, their infection rates increased, or blaming, for example, the government or the federal government. Starting to think about accepting the situation for what it is, and then begin to say, how do I take some of this and refocus it positively? How do I change my perspective? So when I think about my graduation date, if I'm worried that my graduation date will be pushed back by 3 months or 6 months, what does that mean for that additional time that I have, right? How can I refocus that positively? How can I refocus my planning, right? How do I change or adapt my schedule? And how do all of those things build your resilience? So there is lots of evidence that hardship, and we've all had them, difficult events, they contribute to building your resilience. So I am not taking this lightly, but I am suggesting to you that this experience should, for many of us, if not all of us, contribute to building our resilience. So what are the obvious stuff? I don't have to tell you this. You're probably way better at doing this than I am. Staying physically well, eating well, exercising, finding moments of joy and pleasure. Okay, I saw these in some of your answers, and this is a no-brainer. This, you know, you don't need a graduate degree to know that this is important. And welcome to the Thomas family. But, you know, if Zoom calls with your family, this is my new baby nephew, and I've not seen him for 3 months, and I find it very, very difficult. His christening has been canceled. It was supposed to be this coming Sunday. Short of a big family event, we have this big fat Greek get together, and we all get together and we cheer, and that's my family at the top. And so maintaining hope because things eventually, I can't tell you when, I don't think anybody really knows, but eventually things will get better. But what are some of the academic strategies? So I'm sure you're most eager to hear what I have to say about this. So I've actually divided them in emotional, psychosocial, looking around, and then moving your own work forward. So at an emotional and psychosocial support, some strategies that I highly recommend is to seek out support from your supervisors and your peers. Many of you, very independent, smart, resourceful people, don't want to bother anybody. You don't want to burden your supervisors. You don't want to burden your graduate students, your peers, but this is the time to seek out emotional support and to vent. So I have many of my colleagues on speed dial, and when I'm having 3 days full of Zoom meetings or something negative happen, it's really wonderful to have an opportunity to vent. In my lab, we meet regularly. We meet every week. We have a lab member with a young baby, and we talk about him, and he giggles and laughs and just gives us a few smiles. So just being connected with each other on a weekly basis, my sense is it's been helpful for my students. Having virtual office hours where there's an opportunity for you to actually speak to either your peers or your supervisors, and reaching out. What I would add is you must keep yourself accountable. You're going to see a recurrent pattern here, a theme of accountability. Keep yourself accountable to doing these things. Looking around, what is your lab doing? Okay, what other projects, reviews, writing, prep for scholarships, prep for presentations? What is everybody else doing? And is there an opportunity for you to hop on, right? This is the best time to try to work collaboratively with others. If you're waiting for your data, or you can't begin your analysis for some reason, this is an opportunity to look around and to say, hey, can I help? And if I help, can I be a co-author? Can I help you with something? That builds your sense of self-efficacy, and it could actually lead to increasing your productivity, even if it's not necessarily for your own work. What are other labs doing? If I take the Jewish Rehab, for example, is there another lab where my graduate students can actually knock on the door and say, well, you guys have been doing lots of work using quantitative analyses. Can I join into one of your meetings? I heard that you're learning X, or you're discussing regression analyses, or you're discussing complex qualitative analyses. Hey, could I join in on one lab meeting and just hear what you guys are talking about, right? And what have you always wanted to learn, to read, or to know about? So I don't know how much free time you have. Some of you probably have a little bit more than others. But this is a good time to read something you've always wanted to read. This is a good time to hop on to another lab or another learning opportunity and say, well, oh, wow, this is great. You've been talking about complex quantitative analyses. I've always wanted to do that. My project is primarily qualitative. I'd love to join in. This is the time to do this. But you need to keep, again, yourself accountable. If you're going to do some of this, you need to have a check with yourself and say, how much of this am I doing? Now, moving your own work forward, which is probably what you are most concerned about, you notice I don't have only 3 or 4 bullets. I have several bullets. And these are suggestions, and we could definitely open it up for discussion. Sorry for the typo. I know you don't think so, but I live with 2 teenagers who seem to be thinking that the pandemic is a vacation. This isn't a vacation, folks. I know you know that painfully well. It's hard when there's no structure, to have, you know, to wake up at 11 or go to bed at 2 in the morning, I would urge you to rethink a little bit how you structure your day to some degree, still make it like a work day. It's great that we have a little more free time to, you know, maybe you can go for a jog at 2 in the afternoon where you always went at 6 in the morning before you went to school, or you were doing it in the evening. But it's still a time of hopefully some productivity. I would urge you to revisit your timelines, and I would also urge you to create a weekly agenda. Now, I'm going to give you an example, and those of you that know, and it's also because I very much like colors, but I am keeping myself accountable with a weekly and daily schedule. I've always done that. I've always been organized like that, but I'm doing it now more and more because I've had to fit in more personal time with children, with my teenagers at home, calling my elderly dad who has a chronic heart condition. And so I'm much more attuned to the importance of having a weekly agenda. What I think you can also do is start creating a concept map of your work, how the pieces come together, that constellation. I think a physical representation of your work is an opportunity for you to be able to build your elevator pitch, something that we don't always have lots of time as graduate students. I would make a list of your strengths and what you've learned and something you would like to learn. Can you start some of your writing? Can you start parts of your thesis? I have a couple of students whom I've suggested they start writing their methods. You know, do you have an opportunity to write up your comps or work on the comps? Exam for those of you that have done them and you've always really wanted to see whether you could turn it into a publication. Career scholarships are coming up. You know, for those of you that are going to be applying for those, this is a time. And yeah, the fall is 6 months away, but if you were not successful and want to try again, this is the time to start building your story for your scholarship. Plan your next abstract for XYZ conference you've been wanting to go. You know, prep your slides. You know, give a career talk. Those of you who are at the JRH know that we have talking research. We have plenty of slots that we want to fill with students' work. This is your time. And if you're not a member of the JRH group, talking research has now been open to every other career site, and we are looking to fill slots. This is a time for you to prep a talk, give a talk, gets you another line on your CV. And importantly, why not mentor other students? You know, that's a wonderful experience for you to learn. Another thing that you can put on your CV. And again, keep yourself accountable for these things. Keep talking to yourself about how you must engage in some of these things. So moving forward, again, you see here on the left are the suggestions that I just made. So, but I do want to emphasize revisiting your timelines and your milestones, being organized. You know, some students say to me, oh, I'm a bit last minute. Oh, I don't make these fancy lists, you know, but this is the time. This is a time to be even more organized and not a time to slack off, for better term. Motivation, digging deep inside you and finding whatever is left in terms of your motivation is going to be more important than ever. And holding yourself and your peers accountable. Let me give you an example of how I do this with fellow researchers. When I've been slacking off on a manuscript, I say to them, I want you to send me an email on this and this date saying I'm expecting the paper. So hold yourself and your peers accountable. And so finally, I asked you, what are some of the things that you've been doing to try to get through this? And I was really impressed to see how there's a lot of positivity. Some of you have just come up with a plan B, Zoom calls, support from peers and supervisors. You actually find that you have more quiet and less noise around you with a little more time. You have accepted that your productivity will probably wax and wane. More leisure is always a wonderful thing. We sacrifice a lot of that in school. You've been writing more and you've been having regular meals. So that's it. So I'm just going to end by saying that I'm hoping that, because I am an optimist, that this will end soon. And how could I not put the rainbow that we're all seeing, everybody? So that's it, folks. I think I probably took a little more time than I wanted to, but we do have a good, 40 minutes.